Welcome back to Learn Academic English. In today's video, I'm going to give you an overview of prefixes in English. And to get started, we're going to look at a few example situations. The first one is at a work meeting, and someone says, he miscalculated the costs. The next one is at a dentist. So imagine that you're traveling and you have a dental emergency and you need to see a dentist, but the dentist speaks only English. And this dentist says to you, we need to extract a tooth. At a hospital, you might hear a post-operative infection. At school, your professor might say to you, your argument is invalid. Or when you read the newspaper, you might see a misappropriation of funds. Well, in all these situations, we have these words that are quite advanced, but if you look closely, you'll see that each of these words has a prefix. And if you know the prefix, it can help you to guess the meaning of these new words. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about what prefixes are, why they are so helpful to learn, and then I will give you a quick overview of just a few common prefixes. In future videos, I'll talk about more prefixes, and I will talk about prefixes in more detail. And finally, at the end of the video, I will show you how knowledge of prefixes can help you on tests like the TOEFL and ielts tests. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to please give this video a like and subscribe if you want more videos about English for intermediate and advanced English learners from an experienced and trained English teacher. And don't forget to leave a comment below. I love to read your comments, so let me know if you can think of other examples of words that have the prefixes that we look at today. So let's get started. The first prefix we have is the prefix mis, which means incorrect or wrong. And an easy way to remember this one is the word mistake. We also have example words like miscalculate, which is the word that I showed you in the previous example. To miscalculate is to calculate the numbers incorrectly. We also have verbs like misread, misspell, and the noun miscommunication. Miscommunication means that people misunderstand each other during communication. And I'm sure that you can think of other examples because this is a very common prefix. The next one is post, which means after. And this one is not as common, but we do use it. For example, post-operative. Post-operative means after an operation, after surgery. For example, the post-operative instructions or a post-operative infection. Post-COVID is a common word right now. And of course, you know the verb postpone, which means to do something later or after. And if you learn post, you should also learn pre, because these are a pair, they are opposites. So we have post, which means after, and pre, which means before, like prepay, preheat. This is a very common verb that we use when we turn the oven on so that it reaches the temperature before we put the food in the oven. We also have prepare and previous. So I want to point something out here, which is that some prefixes like preheat, pre, we can take the prefix off and we are left with a word. So for example, preheat, take off pre, and we have the verb to heat. But for prepare, or for example, postpone, we cannot take the prefix off. So just notice that some words, the prefix can be taken off or put on, and in other words, the prefix has become part of the word. So in prepare, you cannot take off pre and have the verb pair. Prepare is part of the word. The next suffix is x or e, which means out. And an easy way to remember this one is the word exit. We have extract, that is the example from the dentist. So extract, you can imagine if x means out, extract means to take out or to pull out a tooth. We also have export, explode, where everything comes out, and emissions. Emissions is a common word now. Emissions is the pollution that comes out of your car or out of a factory. And we often use the word zero emissions now to refer to cars that produce no pollution, no emissions. However, the prefix X has another meaning, which is former. And you'll notice that with this one, we usually use a hyphen between the parts. And former or previous, like ex-husband, ex-wife, ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, ex-boss, and ex-convict. An ex-convict is a person who is a former convict. A convict is a person who was in prison. So an ex-convict is a person who used to be in prison but now is free. And the last one I'm going to show you today is this great prefix in for meaning not. And I think it's great because it is kind of interesting because it has different spellings. So this is the prefix that we saw in the previous example of an invalid argument. Your argument is invalid. Invalid means not valid. Or that it doesn't work, it's not true. So for this prefix, notice that the spelling can change, and I'll show you the rule. We have inappropriate, immature, irregular, and illogical. If the word starts with an M, you're going to add the prefix im. And this is also the case if the word starts with other sounds that we use both lips to make. So M or P or B. Impossible, imbalanced, immature. If the word starts with an R, you add the prefix ir, irregular. And if the word starts with an L, like logical, legal, legible, you add the prefix ill, illogical. Finally, let's take a look at how knowledge of prefixes can help you on the TOEFL or IELTS tests. So on those tests, you're going to have a lot of reading and there will be a lot of new vocabulary. So knowing prefixes can help you to guess the meaning of a lot of those new words. And there are questions like this one where you are given a new word and you have to match it with the correct meaning. In this example, we have, in many underdeveloped countries, the number of illiterate people is decreasing. So if you look at this word, you should recognize that IL is the prefix. And you should notice then that IL is a prefix that means not, so not literate. So the first thing that we'll notice here with the answers is that two of them are answers that show some kind of negative meaning. C and D are not like that, so we're going to go ahead and rule those out and we'll focus just on A and B. Then, if you know literate, you might think literature and letter, that's probably about writing. So that would lead us to choose B. Now, this word might not be difficult for you, but if you see other words that are new for you, use your knowledge of prefixes to help you break that word down and then match it with the best answer. Finally, I want to mention that when you are learning prefixes, you want to be careful to learn words that are really like easy, clear examples of the meaning. For example, sometimes in my class, when I teach prefixes, my students give examples of words that don't match the prefix meaning. And I even see these on the internet too, so you do have to be careful. For example, with the prefix post, which means after, post office is not an example of that prefix. Dis, which means not, distance is not an example of that prefix. What about Mr.? Miss means incorrect, but the word Mr. is not an example of that prefix. It's just a word that starts with M-I-S. So when you're learning prefixes, do be careful to choose really clear, good examples that help you to remember those words and the meaning of those prefixes. Don't forget to leave a comment below and let me know what other examples of these prefixes you can think of. And if you look in the description box, you'll notice a link to a handout about prefixes that you can use to help you study at home. Until next time, take care, and I hope to see you soon.